Hello there.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hi, I have to leave Paris and now I need to go back to
Kathy.
back to Provence.
Yeah, I just chose my home. I mean, it's Provence, so.
Well, and
So
I know that.
I have a real background. Yeah, I have a real background.
Oh, wait, here's the one that I had before. I love that one. Okay. Let's see. Now to change it.
Hello, hello, for those joining us. Coming in.
Bonjour.
Bonsoir. Remember?
Bonsoir. Ouais.
Yeah. I don't know what time zones, Kathy, Mary, Katja, where you are in, but are you in the West Coast also?
I am. I'm in the Seattle area.
Yeah, you're in the Seattle, okay. And Kathy?
I am in Wisconsin.
Okay.
It's 1 p.m. in the afternoon.
Okay.
And what about you,
Marianne,
Marianne?
Mary. Mary one, if I can say that.
Oh,
Where do you live?
I'm also in Wisconsin.
Okay, you're awesome.
Oh.
Okay.
And we had a few more people sign up just this morning.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. I don't know officially if they'll be joining us, but they signed up today.
Okay. Yeah. Here the sun is just setting. It's been a beautiful day. It's just been, they were talking about temperatures in Provence, where I am. They were talking about, this is similar to temperatures in the month of June.
Already.
I'm going, no, we don't want that. So we're talking about what, 20, 23, 24 degrees Celsius this afternoon. It was, yeah, a little strange.
So are you able to go out and, I mean, what can you do now?
In France, I live in a zone that is not as locked down as in Paris. You know that Paris and several other départements have been more severely, limited. Like Paris is, you can only walk 10 kilometers away from your home with no time limit, but I can do whatever. But I wear a mask and I keep my distance.
Do you have indoor dining yet, or is it just outdoor and for takeaway?
No, Trish, you know what? Talking about missing traveling. I'm just missing going to a cafe and having a coffee with my friends. So no restaurants, no bars, no cafes open, and haven't been open since, can't even remember. It was before Christmas, right? So yeah. Anyway, it's probably for the good cause, I'm saying. Yeah, there are worse things in life than, not having your favorite cafe.
No, that's true. It's not, I mean, we can all do this. We can manage.
Yeah. So yeah.
What I cannot manage without, though, is my morning coffee. So if you'll excuse me, we still have a minute before the rest of everybody should join. So I'm going to go grab that.
Yeah, I have my mineral water. Yes. So have you all been have time to read the book? I mean, I know one hasn't. I'm looking at you, Katja. There was a problem
yesterday.
You watched the films, yeah?
I did. I watched the first one yesterday. I couldn't find Manon on streaming. No.
Okay.
Which service did you find the first one on?
I think it was Amazon.
Okay.
I paid for it. It was $3.99.
Yeah, I saw that too, but I didn't pay the money because I bought the book. So.
Yeah, I didn't have time to read the actual book. I've been listening to the books, and this one doesn't have an audio, so I sat this one out.
Fine. I'm sure you can come with some, general commentaries about, if you've seen at least the first part of the story, which is the first movie, right? So you know a bit about it. And all the others, have you have time to read the book? Yeah. Good. That's the problem with older, it's not old, but older books, it's the audio books. I don't know why they haven't done that one no idea. But not even in, I couldn't even find it in French in an audiobook. So who knows? Yeah. But I'm guessing that a lot of people know the movies. And if have you seen the movies, like when they came out? No, the 1980s. I don't know. No, because I have an idea that, you know, Trish, the movie came out in when they came out in France, right? So we're in what, 86? And in the United States, it was the same year, or
Roughly. I mean, usually a foreign film will come out within the following year if it's popular enough. So
okay.
probably by 1987 it came out here.
I remember seeing it. Wow. I was going. I had just, I mean, this is really kind of symbolic for me. I had just met my husband in 85 and we married in 86. And he was from Avignon in Provence. And then I saw those movies and going, good choice, girl. So, you know, the life sometimes, you know, brings you into stuff. Yeah. Should we still be waiting for some? Is that it, Trish? We're still people?
I think we can go
Okay.
ahead and start. It's a couple minutes after 11, and as people trickle in, I think
Okay.
that's okay. We can
Okay.
dive in.
So now, for those of you who have read the book or seen the movies, maybe I don't know if you saw my presentation of concerning Marcel Pagnol in the beginning of the month, where I did this whole little slideshow. Yeah. So you have an idea who the author is and why he wrote the books, and a little bit about his life and all that. What I thought would be interesting, like in this discussion here, was maybe just to go into like the historic context, what this, as usual, I would say, when the books are written or movies are made, it's very often in a, my friend, in a very, what is the historic context, right? So the historic context, well, in this case here, well, the book comes out in the 1950s, right? Hi, Jorge. Hi, everybody. Oops, I can hear a sound somewhere. I don't know. Is there a noise from yours on your
I can't
side?
tell if that's electronic sound or if it sounds like a crying baby, kind of. That's what I hear.
As I was saying, it's not my cat. My cat is closed into the other room. So yeah. Is it okay? Yeah. No, so I was thinking a little bit about giving you an idea of what the context is, both actually for the book and for the movies. So let's just combine the two, and to give you some things to discuss also. So my idea was to put it into a context, and then I've noted down some themes, some ideas, noted down as I've been rereading the books. And first of all, you're in a situation, 1950s, when the novels come out. Marcel Pagnol is known as a film director, filmmaker, and all that. He's not known as a writer, but he will rapidly become a success with his childhood memoirs, right? And then with Jean Le Fleuret and Manon de Source, it's just kind of a following up to his childhood memoirs. But the actual, I would say, the context of when we're in the 1950s in France, it's obviously after the Second World War. And with the huge loss of men and destruction of cities and etc. But we talk about the reconstruction of France, of course, and many other countries in Europe. And it's this story about the glorious 30. Does that ring a bell for anybody? The glorious 30. When we talk about 1945 to 65, roughly, we have de Gaulle, who's actually, and with the Marshall Plan and the Marshall Aid after the Second World War, is helping France to get back into a good situation again, right? We talk about economy and etc., rebuilding the cities. What's interesting also there is that it's really a great change, because what happened was that France goes from, you could say, before the war in the 20s and the 30s, then comes the war, and then the 50s particularly, is that France goes from you could say, a country where there are almost more farmers than city people, and that changes, right? That changes, immensely. So people are moving to the cities, and they kind of forget what the countryside and country life is about. So I'm giving you this little idea there of when you put out a book like this, when you write a book like this, and it becomes a success, and the movies were that huge success also. What is that? What are they telling us? Those novels, are they telling us about idyllic country life and how it's so beautiful and harmonious in the countryside? Question mark. Anyone want to jump in there? Because one of the themes I think is interesting is that the country people, if you want, those people who live in the village and the villagers, if you want, in the novels, are not necessarily just the happy farmers and enjoying life and all that. They're actually mischievous, and they are a little Machiavellic, and the city people like Jean de Florette is cultivated, educated, and he likes beauty, etc. Is that anybody has I will just open the discussion here if anybody wants to jump in, because I think this is one of the themes you could discuss throughout the novels of Jean de Florette and Manon de Source, without talking about the characters particularly, but just generally, country versus city. Anything you have noticed, anything you wanted to talk about here?
I was struck by the disdain that the villagers had for Jean de Florette regarding science. They kept talking, he had all the science, and all the books and the instructions. And that just felt eerily contextually appropriate. I mean, I felt like we're living that in some sense right now. And that there was this, he was very optimistic and forward-looking and hopeful. And they were almost trapped in their way of doing things, and fearful or disdainful of trying anything different or anything new. And it just resonated constantly throughout the book. I just thought that was a fascinating corollary to where we are right now.
Oh yeah, it hasn't grown old. It has not grown old.
No, it hasn't. Unfortunately, yeah.
Unfortunately. But just remember that the novel is from the 1950s, right? And obviously it is, and it takes time. The time of the novel is the 1920s, right? So it's depicting a time where, yes, that's it. That's science was in agriculture. Here we're talking about scientific methods in agriculture. Was a little slow and coming into the habits of the country people. Anybody else who wanted to jump in there, because I'm just going ahead. Anybody else who wanted to say something about this?
I think that one of the things that impressed me was the competition or the clannishness of the villages with they fought against each other instead of working together, and they held long-term grudges against one another, and were not willing to open up to, like she said, new ideas with the science, or if any stranger came into town, it was very suspicious.
It's kind of a universal theme, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Any small town, whenever there's a visitor that comes in, everybody looks at them with suspicion until they get to know them.
And maybe we can learn something from the strangers, maybe these foreigners, maybe we could, develop in another way, and maybe we can adopt some of the ideas, maybe not all of it, but just we could reject some of it also. But it would have been a completely different novel, right? Completely different literature if Jean de Florette had arrived with a hunchback, and that one of you, I think, was just Joyce, or
I actually sort of got the answer to that when I got to the very end.
Okay.
That it basically said they were considered bad luck.
So a hunchback, there's one phrase, there's one, I can't remember, one character, one of the women who says hunchback is bad luck. But actually, when you go into the history of the hunchbacks, I think maybe Trish, you've seen this also. There's in Italy, there was this tradition of what's called a gobbo or the gob. It's like a little charm you have in your keychain, or it's more like last century, right? Like 19th, 20th century. And a hunchback was actually a protection against the evil forces, and you know, a kind of a luck bringer. And have you heard about gamblers in casinos or whatever gambling? There's this saying that if you touch the hump of a humpback, that it gives you luck. So there's a little. So Joyce, you were right in saying a hunchback, as one of the women will say in the novel towards the end, brings bad luck, she says. But also see the hunchback, see Jean de Florette on top. He's a city man, not known. No, they say, oh, he comes from the other village, which is obviously, you know, again, just from the other village is a terrible thing. And he has this deformity. He has this hunchback that makes it even worse, if I can say that, right? He's strange to look at, right? And he's a little worrying because is he bringing us bad luck or whatever? If you go into studies, there have been done many studies of Marcel Pagnol's literature, and when you hear people talk about his novels, it's also that they see Jean Florette as the man who's representing really the foreigner, right? The unknown. And that fear of the unknown and the foreigner is something we can all relate to in many different ways, of course, which is why I have to say it again and again. The novels are so universal and they're so powerful because you see the point of view of Jean de Florette, right? That comes with his science and he wants to do good and he wants to grow this and that. What he doesn't take into really in his mind is that the farmers have been there for generations and their traditions. They live with the nature, right? He's trying to put science on the nature. They live in the nature. So you can see by many different ways, Jean de Florette, on top of that with a hunchback, is representing this this unknown that people do not want to go towards, and they're fearing. Up until the point, I hope all of you have read the end of the novel. I'm not spoiling anything here. Up until the point that they realize who is Jean de Florette, of the woman Florette, who was the great love of Papy, César, and that is actually his son. I mean, the ending of that novel, I know it. I've seen the movies. I know what's happening. I'm still little, you know. I can. It's such wrapping up of that history, which actually brings me to another theme, which is something about. I think the translation in English is providence, which you can say about faith and destiny and all that, you know, ruling over everybody. Anybody has picked up on that? The thing about faith, destiny, mixed with religion and traditions. Anybody want to say something about that? Or continuing something else? Have you thought about that? Are we predestined? Yep, Jorge.
Oh, Jorge, you sound like an electronic Minnie Mouse.
That's a problem with the sound.
Maybe stop your sound and then restart it again. Now I sound like Minnie Mouse.
I don't know what's happening there.
You sound really funny, Jorge.
Oh, it sounded like you got that gas, you know, the
helium, like you're sucking helium.
helium. That's what it is.
I thought in terms of the providence, you know, I felt like at the end he got what he deserved.
Who did? Papy did.
Papy. I mean, you know, he was conniving about the spring. He hid the spring from Jean, and all these machinations and schemes, and they were really patient. They waited years for it to all come to fruition so they could get that property. And then in the end, he really lost everything. He lost the relationship with his grandchild and everything, for that greed. So, he got what he deserved at the end.
Yeah, I call it karma. It was karma for sure.
Mm-hmm. It's like the events happening will actually like even out things, like that there's a justice after all, or something like that. That is really something you can talk about in that novel there, isn't it? But what I also think is, is Papé and Hugolin, his nephew, are they true villains, or do we understand their goals? Do we understand why they're doing what they're doing, or are they just villains, black and white? Are there good ones and bad ones in the novel? Pam?
I felt like there was a big theme which ties in with their villainy, or their glutton for money. They were all about money. He and his nephew were about money, and they thought that would bring happiness. Where Jean de Florette and Manon, they were about enjoying, just being a part of the landscape and just enjoying nature and obviously wanting to be successful, but much less caught up in money as their designation for success, as well as even thinking that I can't remember the nephew's name now. I'm sorry, because I've got he's got two names, but anyway, thinking that he could win her because he told her how many gold coins he had, and she clearly could care less about that stuff, And so I just had the theme of I could say the unchurched, but a lot of people didn't go to church in the novel. But the unchurched were more focused on money, and maybe that's too broad of a statement. But in these characters, that seemed to be more their focus, and focus on always getting ahead and being in front of somebody else, and I look so much better, and having the right clothes, and I don't know. So that was just something that I thought about, and that money doesn't buy happiness. That was kind of, to me, a big theme there. So,
anyone else? Trish? Can't hear you.
Just as a tangent, it's funny that you bring up the word villain, because the etymology of that word actually means like a poor, boorish villager person, right? So it's just to make that linguistic tie. But I appreciate what Pam is saying and what Joyce had been saying and what you're saying, Nina. For me, I found, just to go back to, I think, one of your earlier questions where you talked about kind of the representation between city and countryside, and how people have this kind of xenophobia, like one versus the other. But when Jean de Florette is talking to his family and their distrust of Hugolin, and because he's ugly and, they're suspicious, it's Jean de Florette who's like, no, you need to be more kind, and you need to be compassionate, and you can't just judge somebody because of that. And that's coming from the person who has probably been judged every single day of his life, right? For nothing more than he has a physical difference than somebody else, not because he's not smart, not because he's not good at his job when he was a tax collector or whatever, but simply because of how he looks. And so for him to have that compassion towards somebody else, I thought that was striking to me. And then I thought about kind of nurture versus nature, and what your upbringing, how that shapes you. Because all of these people, of course, as you mentioned, are very much tied to their land, to their traditions, to their beliefs, what they know to be true because they practice it every day, right? This is their routine, this is their ritual, this is all of these things. But then you have Manon, who really was born in the city, is plucked out of that because her parents bring her back to their ancestral home. And because of the situation where they're then displaced even from that home, she becomes of the land, right? She's of the springs, but she's of the land. She is the one who knows where to pick these herbs and where to find these morels, and just her connection to that nature is almost, to me, more potent than what anybody else has, somebody who's been their families for centuries or whatever. So that's what struck me.
I think Joyce has written, Papé had power and control over all the villagers. He was evil for not letting them know who Jean was, a man whose family came from their village. See, Papé has had power. He has power and control. They all say that, right? Why does he have the power? He has land, he has water enough for his agriculture. But one thing Papé does not have is what?
Love, family.
Love, family, a son. I mean, it's his nephew, right? Hugolin is his nephew. Their terrible family history of people hanging themselves and, you know, dying before they should, etc. They are the only one left. I see Papé and Hugolin as a little family unit. And what I get in Papé and in his need and what he's doing is, at the very end, you get it. I mean, he wanted that family name, Soubeyran. He says that to Hugolin several times. He says to his nephew several times, you should marry, I want to this name to perdure, you know, to persist. And it will not, right? Hugolin will die. So it's a tragedy, of course, at the end. But I mean, when I asked the question about, you know, are the villains truly villains? Are they really bad guys? What I think is so powerful in Pagnol's novels, and, you know, in these two novels, is that you do have a kind of compassion, or I'm the only one. I mean, I'm crying. Just look at that life that Papé has spent on not getting the woman he loved. He didn't get Florette. Well, Florette and Papé were lovers, and we don't know exactly what happens, but she will be pregnant, of course, and he's off, probably because she rejected him or didn't want to have something to do with him or whatever, not knowing that she was pregnant, and he's off for the wars in Africa, and that's where he's not getting her letter about being pregnant with Jean, right? I think that is such a powerful story, that you both get Hugolin and Papé's sadness, need for love. I mean, Hugolin's love declaration to Manon is just over the top, right? Isn't it? So what I'm saying there is, I think the villains are not just, you know, bad guys, but also somebody you can understand.
I'm not sure that the people who you think of as being good or worthy are fully good or fully worthy either. I think particularly Manon toward the end there, where she blocks the stream or the spring, and I mean, she's just, I think, just enraged. I can almost feel her white hot fury about what had happened and that caused the death of her father. And I can understand that motivation, but then acting on that, you know, that takes it to a whole nother level. So while I get the motivation, she wasn't as pure as I up to that point. I thought she was like the hero of the book. She was innocent and virtuous and hardworking and loving, but right when you got there, it's like, oh yeah, she's a human too. She still has that other side of her, just like the villains aren't fully villains. I'm not sure that the wholesome people were fully wholesome either.
Nobody is perfect in those novels, right? Nobody. I mean, even think about it, even Jean de Florette, when he comes and he has this, you know, need for authenticity and nature and all that, but he's also, if I can use the word, greedy, right? He wants more, and the rabbits and blah blah. He has this dream of creating a farm with a mass production, right? So there's a kind of a greed in Jean de Florette also, which I think is interesting when you go through it. Pam is saying Papé and Hugolin had a very odd relationship, in that Papé was controlling and pushed his nephew to do things to Jean he didn't really want to do. Right? I really thought Hugolin would tell Jean about the spring. Yeah, because what? Because Hugolin, the nephew, is probably less Machiavellic, if I can say that. He's more a true character. I mean, in that way that he is that far, right? That far from doing something to help Jean de Florette and Amy and their daughter, Pam.
And he showed, I mean, he felt guilt about
Mhm.
what was going on. I mean, because he liked him, and he liked the family. And he shared his own water for a while until they didn't have it. But I just felt like he was the character that was kind of stuck between the forces of doing good and doing evil, or doing bad. I don't think they're not truly evil in the way that we think of, really bad people today or whatever, but within their town, certainly. But I agree also that nobody, what you just said, or whoever just said that, I think Laura said that nobody is good or evil in this, in truly good or truly evil. It's human nature, really. It's the decisions that we make every day. It's the decisions that we make that hurt other people, either purposely or not on purpose. And the ramifications of those, how they come back in the end. So.
I was thinking about what Trish was saying, something about education. Is that this, we're educated to think this and do that, and does that mean that we are kind of or by whatever nature has created in us, that we are, you say, controlled to do a certain thing at a certain moment, or are we allowed to have a choice? Which is what the novel is also about, isn't it? That we have education, we have the surroundings, we have the environment, we have all that, but we still have a choice of maybe doing good things, maybe also realizing that our actions or inactions would have a consequence for others, right? I think that is really one of the important things also you can talk about, and which is a great thing to read. Imagine that for French people, particularly, of course, in 1950s, when there had been, I'm just linking this to the historic context, when there's discussions about who did what during the Second World War, right? What would you have done? I always say that when I do my tours and in France and I talk about the Second World War, saying, would I be part of the resistance movement? I would have loved to. I would have loved to think of myself as a hero, and, but if my daughter was about to be, whatever, mistreated, would I have, see what I'm talking about is our actions, our inactions. I have no idea what I would have done during the Second World War. So that whole discussion about conscience and what we do has an effect on other people, even though they're not the close by, even though there's not our family. That for me is really, Papé is doing something to Jean de Florette, not knowing it's his son. He realized at the very end, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, Trish.
Well, that also reminds me too that when you do something, like if you write this novel, when you do some kind of reflection just after a major event happens, right? There's a tendency or there can be a tendency to look back with a sense of nostalgia. And there is that. There's beautiful descriptions about how he describes the land and all of these things. Even if the people are flawed, there is something that is divine in a way about when he talks about the land and all of these things. So there is a kind of nostalgia that goes with that. But I love the point that you're making, Nina, in that we have to make sure that we're looking back, not just with these rose-colored glasses or lavender field-colored glasses and saying, oh, isn't everything just so wonderful? Because it is about those personal choices. And I mean, okay, I really don't mean to go political, but it's the next closest thing that I can use as an analogy, right? When we, in recent years, we're hearing things like, make America great again. Well, isn't there greatness already? Aren't there wonderful things? Yes, we make wrong decisions. Yes, things kind of go sideways and we all make that mistake top down, all the way across the board. But how do you fit into that? What's your role in making something better, or making those atrocities stop, or making daily life for somebody else or your neighbor, or even in the situation we are with COVID, right? I mean, it can't be like, oh, you're the other. It's all you did this, you did that. And it's not me because I'm contained and I know what I like and this is my tradition and this is how we are. It can't be that. It's there is a togetherness in this, and what I do affects somebody else because no man is an island. Okay, I'm off my soapbox. Bye.
Well, and in regard to that, I sort of think, based upon how all of the characters were portrayed and the story, that this particular human interaction, and I know we are doing this because it's France, but the human interaction could have been another country, another time, and it would have been the same human interactions because it was human. And I think that's something that when he wrote the novel, it was sort of universal in the human action.
Oh, for sure, for sure. That's why that's why I chose this novel also. I mean, of all the French literature you could think about, what was the first book that came into my mind? Also because I live in Provence, obviously, but it was just because this book has so many layers in it. So many layers. You can read it just for the story about revenge and, love and all that, but there's so much more to it, for sure. I mean, it's, what interesting, just if I can add to that, is when the movies came out in 86, we're in a moment where, 1986, we're in a moment where François Mitterrand is the French president, and his Minister of Culture is called Jacques Lang, you might have heard of, and they had some great ideas about, new, how culture should develop, etc. The movie with the hunchback coming to the very enclosed insular village, and they're looking at him as the foreigner, although he's just from the city, he's not, from another country, was seen as a symbol of what France should do, fighting the extreme right-wing party founded by Jean-Marie Le Pen, at that time called the Front National, anti-immigrants, etc. It was very interesting how the movie got that dimension also. I know they're not talking politics, if you want, directly in the movie. The novels are not talking, but so we see how his writings into the movies became important in that way also, in accepting the foreigner, accepting what comes from outside. Right? It's an important moment also in France, But Lynn, you're right. I mean, you say, yes, it's a French book and it came out in France, blah, 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 but it's a universal masterpiece, I would say. Anyone know the exact name of the movie? It's the same, Jorge, it's the same as the books. So that's easy. Joyce says, the revelation of Papy's relation to Jean Manon at the end was a surprise and so sad. It was so interesting that the birth of his heir occurred at the same time as his death. Yes, that's very symbolic. And at which moment is it? Remember that? Which season are we in? When Manon is given birth and Papy is dying.
Christmas.
See, that for me is something else I wanted to discuss about in the novel is, what do you think about the role about religion versus, the more, say, traditions or superstitions, maybe more, and the Republican authorities, like the mayor and the non-believers and all that. Has anything you've thought about in that connection there? What the church represents, what the Republic or the authorities represent, the non-believers, etc. Anybody who's thought about that? Because I'm thinking about Christmas, right? Christmas, Jesus, a new child is born. The old world has kind of passed away and a new world is coming. I thought that was one of the things that came into my mind. But what I think about the Marcel Pagnol's novels and other work he has done is how religion actually has an important part of the story in many different ways. How the church is always there. The church is physically in the middle of the village. As if you travel throughout France, it's in the middle of the village, always, right? And next to it is the town hall and the cafe. It's the golden triangle, as they call it, right? So you have the representation of religion and the Republic on the same square very often, right? and then the cafe where they can all meet and discuss, which actually is what happens quite in the novel also. But this mix of how superstition, the old farmers' sayings about when the rain will come or not come, mixed into prayers for the Virgin Mary or any saint that could help him, mixed with what I thought was interesting also, the old woman, Baptistine, who takes care of Manon when Jean de Florette has died and her mother is going a little bonkers there. Baptistine is the old woman living in the old sheepfold there, and who is an Italian, by the way, or Piemonte, as they say, from the northern part of Italy. And she's the one who's going to cast a spell. Remember that? She says, I can't remember the exact words, but she casts a spell, so she's a witch. So we are mixing also this thing in with superstition, and they actually believe in the spell, right? They believe that she has cast a spell on the village. Anyone has picked up on that, or am I?
It was coincident to Manon plugging up the stream that she casts that spell on them, and the water dries up. Oh, we shouldn't have moved her husband's bones. Oh, we did the wrong thing. So it was that coincidence. I'm trying to remember the character who painted the arrows on the stones.
The carpenter.
Is he one of the guys who would sit at the cafe during church? One of the non-believers? So earlier when you were talking about, what would I have done? What role would I have played in this drama? You had this guy who was trying to, hey, there's a spring over there. But he didn't actually tell them or show them. He just sort of hinted around that there was a spring. So there was this idea prevalent that everybody should just mind their own business. You shouldn't get involved. Except for the two guys, of course, who were totally involved in plugging up the spring and hiding it.
Yeah. No, but the thing I thought is, of course, you have this, no, mind your own business. And, even if you, it's still, if I can say something as a foreigner in Provence, even though I've been here for like 30 years now, is that I figured that out in the beginning, where my husband came from Avignon, right? Born in Avignon. And we are in Copenhagen, and, by chance we meet a French woman, and she says, I'm from Nîmes, the city Nîmes, which is like 40 kilometers away from Avignon. And I said to my husband, oh, Avignon, Nîmes, that's kind of close by. Not that you know one another. And he says, oh no, that's another world. We have the Rhone River between us, first of all, right? And the other one is Avignon, the Catholic city, and Nîmes, the Protestant city. But that's totally another story I'm telling there, right? But it's just an example of how the incredible insular, feeling of nothing is going to happen here will have to open up, right? Will have to open up. They have to accept the, interference of other people. They will have to accept the development of the agriculture. There has to be a modern development in the world. And that is coming with what for you, what represents the new world? I was saying very symbolically that Manon's child will be born at Christmas time. And I'm kind of hinting that, I'm saying that representing the new world. Who's the father of that child, of Manon's child?
Was the teacher, right? The teacher in the school?
Yep. What does a teacher represent?
Oh, education. And he was the geologist that was out trying to build a collection of the rocks and things to show his students. So yeah, you're right. It's sort of a new vision for the village.
It is, yeah. That's what I'm kind of. What was interesting when you also when you read about Marcel Pagnol's life, you know, his father was a school teacher. He himself becomes a school teacher. Education was such a huge thing. And when you think about the whole development of France, what we call the Third Republic, right, 1870 to 1945, is actually this moment where education becomes really important. So even though the novel takes place in the 1920s and it's written in the 1950s, he's making a point. I think for me, Marcel Pagnol is making a point of education, right? It's so that is what will bring us to the next level, the next step is learning things or reading stuff, or you know, not particularly. Trish, you were mentioning science, and I agree with you. And what Marcel Pagnol says is not necessarily just science as such, right? But just education, you know, knowledge to get further, to understand other people, and to get rid of that fear of the unknown and all that. But another thing I wanted to say was that religion is safe, but what about the women generally? That's kind of my favorite theme. I talked about the last time also, but the women in the novel is what for you? Who? Manon, obviously we have Manon, but who else could have? Who's actually playing? What roles do the women play in the novels? Anyone who wants to talk about that? Because I'm thinking what I actually have noted down once in a while is that, first of all, what if Jean, what if Papy, of course, had married Florette? No, Florette, that would have been a completely different story, right? Think about every time you have a conflict of some kind, there's always a woman somewhere behind. For instance, the blind woman at the very end who will, you know, tell Papy about Florette's letter and tell him the truth and all that. She's blind. She doesn't know the effect of what she's saying, right? On top of that, she's blind. She's kind of like a magic creature somehow. But for me, that there's something about the women in the novels that are bringing another dimension. Maybe more compassion, not always, but maybe a little more compassion, maybe a little more understanding, maybe a little more tolerance or whatever it is. And they always have something to say, which is quite important when you're in a Mediterranean culture, as Provence is, you know, the role of the women in the Mediterranean cultures in general. I'm looking at Fran and Jorge. Fran has an incredible story about women in the Basque country. I was really surprised about that, how it's women have the power. But whereas in France, it's not, I mean, I'm not in Basque country here, so not at all. But the women are kind of that I would say that framework maybe in some ways that the men are evolving in. Am I completely out of, you know, out of the story there? What do you think, Pam?
You know, I loved the women characters in so many different ways. For instance, the minor characters, like the wife of, I can't remember if he was the baker or the butcher, but he was one of the guys that hangs out and doesn't go to church. That she really called him to task several different times, and for looking at Manon, and so she was kind of jealous, but then also for just the way they interacted. You thought, okay, really, she's calling him to task in front of other people, which was probably very embarrassing. So who really has the power in that family? And then the blind woman. So I was confused by the character that was the woman you were just talking about from Italy that had the sheepfold. Yeah, she confused me because I didn't quite understand. She was so subservient to Jean de Florette's family in the beginning, but how gracious she was of taking them in, and really, she probably is the one that taught Manon a lot about the land and about the herbs. But I just didn't quite get her whole concept, other than the fact that she was very loving, because she was superstitious and maybe witch-like, but then also she was very faithful to be taking things to her husband's grave and being so upset when his bones were exhumed. But that's a sidelight. I just thought the women really were pivotal to a lot of the story. So.
Anyone else? Thinking about Manon, I don't know if maybe I'm just something I'm putting into the novel. But for me, she is kind of announcing a liberation of women also. See what I'm saying? The free woman. She doesn't have any illusions anymore. She has had she loses her father because of these terrible deeds that Hugolin and Papé did, obviously. But I actually see her, and there were many discussions about also for the movies, about the actress who played Manon in the movies of 1980s, if she was the right woman to do that, because there's something about freedom and just being yourself and choosing the man that you want to a certain extent, right? That I thought was interesting, kind of announcing maybe something about women's movements, etc. in that way there. She's a really interesting character there. And Baptistina, as you say, is kind of this woman that has, like a double figure, double importance. She's kind of becomes the mother of Manon because her own mother is kind of not there in her mind anymore. Tells her about nature, tells her about what it is, what nature is. And Baptistina, I think I just said that a few moments ago, but Baptistina also represents these poor Italians who had fled Italy, poverty, and from the 1920s, fascism in Italy. She really represents those people also. And that's where the strength comes from. Manon has that strength behind her, right? She knows that Baptistine will always be there for her. So for me, it's a lot of men doing bad deeds or good deeds in the movie, but in the novel, sorry. But the women do play a major role also, for me at least, right? And this is something that you can ignore maybe, but I like to read it into the novel there. But I think what's interesting, another subject, just quickly, I think time is running. Trish, it just tells me when you need some time to say something. But no, what I was thinking about is that what those novels did and the movies did is that they brought an interest to rural areas, the hinterland of Marseille there, and particularly with movies in the 1980s, together with a certain book called A Year in Provence, and I'm sure you've heard about Peter Mayle's, a British gentleman writing a book about Provence, was not as accepted and loved by locals as Marcel Pagnol's work were and still are. I mean, Peter Mayle's book about Provence have brought many visitors to Provence, and a growing interest for the area. And Brits have been buying houses here, etc. But it is it's just interesting to see how Marcel Pagnol writes about his own people and his own country and his own roots, and that is totally accepted here. I've talked to many friends about Pagnol. Interviewed a friend last week about it, and she says, well, he's talking about us, right? He's talking about us. This is really something that will come back over and over again, that Pagnol was so deep into the history that he was allowed to talk this way about Provence, right? Pam says, I think because of her father's death, Manon was liberated to be the strong woman she became. Had he lived, she may have been expected to leave and go to the city and expand her education, as well as being expected to marry. Yep, Pam, who knows? That's another theory, that what would have happened if Jean hadn't died. Yeah. Sorry, Trish.
Do you happen to know how long it took Marcel Pagnol to write this? Because the development of the characters, it's so very well fleshed out. And even minor characters, you get insights into their true character or their typical nature, right? How they would behave and all of that. And then I think about the names that he chose, which to my guess would be, okay, these are generally typical Provençal names, but the meanings of them are also quite interesting as well. So, I mean, I had to Google those, but Hugolin means soul, mind, or intellect. But when Papé uses the nickname Galinette, it's a little chicken, right? So he's just like going around doing whatever, and focused on making his carnations and doing this thing, and so that was interesting to me. And then to think about Baptistine, who you alluded to being kind of like a witch because she does this curse or whatever, but Baptistine is related to Baptist, like John the Baptist, as though she were a precursor for something, right? And then Manon means beautiful queen, right? So this beautiful queen kind of later on may be a Mother Mary kind of figure who then gives birth to the new generation, the new child, all of that. It just, that was all intriguing to me. And so I'm wondering, do you know how long it took for him to actually create this novel?
Well, actually, when you read about or listen to Marcel Pagnol's own, talking about his life and his work, is that he had for many, many years, he had this story that he had heard about the revenge of a wild shepherdess in the collines and the hills in Provence. So he had the story in him, right? And then he starts with writing his childhood memoirs, right? My father's glory and my mother's castle, and this comes after. So what you can imagine is that he had already made a film called Manon de Source, and this movie is about the revenge of the shepherdess. Marcel Pagnol would make this movie with his at that time wife, Jacqueline Pagnol. And he will say himself that originally he had made that movie into a 4-hour-long movie, but that the distributor said, no, 2 hours. So we can imagine that in creating a movie that originally was 4 hours long, that he had lots more to say. So obviously that's where, the process of writing is going that way there. And the symbolic use of the names, thank you, Trish, you are completely... It's right. You can go really far into Baptistine, John the Baptist, or Manon. Manon, also called Manon because her mother is an opera singer, and Manon Lescaut, right, is a famous opera, etc. So there's a link to culture, education, and all that also. So there are many levels of understanding, of course, of many novels, right? Can I just ask you a question that's really been on my mind? If you should compare Marcel Pagnol and these novels in particular to anything that you have read, be that American, Spanish, whatever, Italian, whatever literature, is there any writer, any work that you could link this to? That was really one of my big things that I wanted to ask you about. Is that as a reminder, as a description of nature or the characters? Kathy? Yeah.
Willa Cather is an American author, and her book, My Antonia, is about the pioneer times in Nebraska in, I believe, the late 1800s.
Okay.
And there's the country life and the city life, the town life. And it's an immigration story, people from other countries coming to America. And very much full of description of the beauty of the place.
Could you write it in the chat box?
Yes,
Is that a possibility? I would like to note it down also. Thank you so much. Anyone else who have had some ideas of reminding you of something else? Thank you so much. Jorge, see what your voice sounds like?
Okay, is my voice okay now? Yeah, good. Hello, everybody. Nina, now you mentioned that, and I mean, I have to confess, I haven't read much about this author here, just a couple of books. But regarding and basing all the characters that they have very, you know, tremendous life in their backgrounds and everything, all storylines reminds me for some reason, and probably you would understand better what I'm saying, about the entire life of Pablo Picasso, because everything around him, it was kind of cloudy, sunny. I mean, it could be like a 4 seasons in one day just being around him. And I don't know, does it make any sense to you what I'm saying?
Yep, and yep, getting that. No, but it's you know, whatever comes into your mind. It's not, I'm not searching for the right answer. So yeah, we have other suggestions. Thomas Hart is Far from the Madding Crowd. Yeah. France says Federico Garcia Lorca, The House of Bernarda Alba. Great, thank you. Can I tell you what French people say about Marcel Pagnol? They actually, he's like a French Mark Twain because of the descriptions of nature. So I don't know how much Mark Twain I can find in Marcel Pagnol. Maybe because it's been many, many years since I've read Mark Twain. But anyone, can you see Mark Twain in that? Or yeah.
You know, I've been desperately trying to think who these characters, that the male characters particularly reminded me of, because they were kind of always sneaking around and getting into mischief and sort of living right on the edge of the law. And then to that extent, I do think Mark Twain captured some of that. I think particularly in Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, I think that because they were always kind of just not quite legal in what they were doing and just a little bit sneaky. So yes, Mark Twain, I could see that. I can totally see that.
Mm-hmm. A description of the nature also, maybe love for nature.
Yes, the river particularly, and everything around the river and the wildlife around the river. Yes, I could see that. Yeah. Thank you. That's very helpful. You relieved me.
Good. Yeah, but then another thing that people, I mean, you read about analyses of Marcel Pagnol's books, is that because it's so well weaved, right? How the story evolves and the characters, etc., that he's like an Alexandre Dumas, right? The Three Musketeers, Alexandre Dumas, with all these characters and how they interact, and then they glide out, and you kind of forget them, they come back, etc. So that's another thing you can think about, maybe Alexandre Dumas' literature. I do prefer Marcel Pagnol, I have to say. But, anyone else who wanted to bring? I think
maybe you could go back into the chat because Carol put a nice comment in there.
Oh, sorry, I got past the books there. Appreciate the timely message that when you know about cruelty and stay silent, the entire community is complicit. Analogies with many novels on racial issues in the US. Oh yeah, so right. That is true. And I there was a question about before we had the Google Docs there was a question from was Carol, I think, interesting. She said, interesting that the climate change, weather issues, and poor infrastructure like outdated lead pipes have kept water quality issues in the news in the US. Is water still an issue in Provence? Oh, yes. See, think about it. Is water, with the earth and the seasons, maybe the real, true characters of the novels? I mean, water just rules everything, doesn't it? You have the water and you own land, you can grow agriculture. I mean, climate change, sorry, for me, it's a fact. We have in Provence, for instance, just to give you an idea, the wine harvest has been, in the last 10 years, has been pushed earlier and earlier and earlier. So that's a fact. I talked to people who have olive trees in Provence that normally you don't have to irrigate. Now they're irrigating. So yes, it is an issue in France. The other thing about it, think about when you read a novel that goes that takes place in 1920s, and what is the main source of water in the village? The fountain, right? That's where they all get their water. The boulanger, right? The bread maker. To make bread, you need water. You need water for the pastis, on the cafe. And think about how France actually was. You have to wait to the late, I think, or mid 1980s before there was still a few places left, but that French people, actually all French people, had running water inside their houses. That's the thing we also have to think about, that how water has had an importance in that way there, right? The development of getting running water and modern plumbing, etc., into houses. So water is still an issue and will continue to be an issue. We haven't, just give an idea, I was just saying, for those of you who were here in the very beginning, we had temperatures today that are like the month of June. And my garden is suffering a little bit because it has not rained since, I can't remember, it was a little bit of rain. So water is an issue. That was a good question about actually the importance of water in the novels. Yeah.
That just made me think, though, about the symbolism of it too, because up until now, until you guys just said that, I was really thinking about just the literal, okay, the spring that's running underneath the property, them blocking it up, all of this stuff. But then you mention how it is interwoven into the culture, even when you mention the pastis, right? That it's transformative. Pastis is not pastis until you add the water, and then the color changes and it becomes that milky white kind of thing. And that kind of transformation then makes me think about at the end of the first part, at the end of Jean de Florette, when they unblock the stream or the spring, and Pape baptizes him, right, to call him the king of the carnations, or whatever terminology he uses, and that these non-believers use a religious rite to kind of christen themselves and pass over that power. And then again, thinking about Baptistine, who was at the, before, when that was all blocked up, that she was at the only source of fresh flowing water on that property, right? And that Jean de Florette would have to make those daily treks multiple times a day to go back to that, to restore his own properties, to restore his family, in essence. So, okay, now my mind is just getting blown by that. So I just said it out loud.
That's good. It's nice to have your mind blown once in a while. It's going like that. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know how we're time-wise, Trish. Are we?
Well, officially we're overtime now, but we can decide amongst ourselves if we want to go a little bit more. We do, we want to be respectful of everybody, of your time, and I'm so grateful to Nina to putting all of this together. She's done an impeccable job. Not only with this presentation, the one at the beginning of the month, but the additional things that she's contributed. Fran has also done that too. For those of you who read our first book, not only did he do his wonderful presentations, but he has great articles and other videos that are associated along with that. So if you want to go back and watch any of those things or read any of those things, they're available to you at any time on our website. Before we either keep pushing forward or close this up, does anybody have any questions either about this or book club or anything? Crickets.
Do we have one for April?
We do, and we even have the author here, if you can believe that. Ben Curtis, you are on deck.
Hi, everybody. Hey, Nina, that was a fantastic job of leading that discussion. Super, super interesting. I remember the movies from the 80s. I haven't read the novel, I have to say, but I remember the movies, and I was super impressed also by what everybody had to contribute. So it was a real pleasure, and I'm excited to get to lead with Trish's incredible help the book club for next month. So the book for next month is called The Habsburgs, The History of a Dynasty, which I wrote. So I used to be a professor of European politics and history at Seattle University. And kind of my specialty is the history and politics of Central and Eastern Central Europe. And I decided, you know what, there needs to be a better book than currently exists on the most important family in European history, which is the Habsburgs. And if that name is sort of floating around in your head, yeah, I think I heard of them once. They ruled basically everywhere at one point or another, literally from Portugal to Poland, from Spain to Serbia, from the Netherlands all down to Naples. Like the Habsburg fingerprints are everywhere in European history. And so I wrote this book to hopefully be like a reasonably accessible introduction to them that doesn't take 800 pages. So it's not a novel. It is a scholarly book. And I just reread it in the last couple of weeks for the first time since I wrote it almost 10 years ago. And I will admit it's pretty dense. But I hope that if you are interested to learn more about the greatest dynasty in European history and how their influence goes throughout European history through the last 800 years, it's a pretty good bird's eye view of all the most important things that happened in much of European history over the last 800 years, that you might join us in April to read about the Habsburgs. I'm super excited to have anybody along who is interested to join us, and I think it will be a really fun discussion. Next Monday, we have the introduction where I will give a kind of little slideshow about who are the maybe most famous Habsburgs. I'll tell some fun and juicy stories about some of the famous ones. I'll introduce you to some fascinating Habsburg facts, and there are some pretty fascinating Habsburg facts, I must admit, just to set us up to anybody who's interested to dive into this family. So thank you for anybody who wants to join for next month. I will really look forward to getting to walk through centuries of European history with the most impressive European dynasty along with you.
And just to add in, Ben, and we're so grateful that you are here to be able to do this and to have the author. I mean, like, it's cool that our guides are putting these together and they're putting all the effort to do these presentations, do the research, share the background information, and all of that. But now we get to pick Ben's brain. I mean, that's just awesome. So I'm excited for that. But also for those of us who are passionate about European travel, I think it is crucial for all of us to get this understanding of the connections and the political connections, the familial connections, all of that stuff, because no matter where we go in Europe, there is definitely a strong presence and trace of all of that. I mean, you can't escape it. And so without that kind of base understanding, I think that we can miss out on things while we're traveling through Europe. So this is certainly going to enhance all of our experiences next time we're over on the continent.
Yeah, and I would also say that one of the things in reading about how the Habsburgs ruled for all those centuries is there's a surprisingly large amount of lessons for 2021, right? Like, you can learn a lot about politics and government and the way things work today just by reading how these people stayed on top for so many centuries. So it isn't all just dead white men. There's some important dead white women, but it also has relevance for our current period.
Okay, so I just want to look through these comments really quick, and hopefully the question got answered about boule or pétanque. If you were in my virtual tour, we showed a little bit of that in Paris, but those of you who are in the Seattle area, note to you, you have several pétanque clubs in the area. So there's one in Bellevue, there's one in Seattle, there's a great one in Edmonds when they have many, many courts down at the Edmonds field, and they plan to develop more as they restructure that kind of park quarter area. So if you haven't had the opportunity to do that, like everybody has said in the comments, it is similar to Italian bocce ball, where you have a target ball and you try to get your own metal ball closer to that, whereas in bocce you play it with wooden balls, or it's akin to horseshoes, right? You're just trying to get closest to the target. So it's something that anybody can play. And if you happen to be in some French town and you see some locals playing it, invite yourself. Just ask them if you can either observe or even play. And most people are really generally gracious and want you to be a part of that because it's such a fun social game.
But you have to play it not in Paris, Trish. You have to come to
you play. I know. I am. Well, I told you yesterday.
come
I
on.
actually did play in Avignon. I
You
did.
did,
I
you did,
I
yeah.
walked inside the wall and there was a couple playing, and I invited myself to that, so that was great. But I will come back and you and I will play.
You're all very welcome to come to Avignon, because it is one of the most beautiful places in the world, of course. But I'm just reading through the commentaries, and thank you so much. I'm so happy that you have enjoyed this. Those of you who haven't read the book yet, whenever, but hopefully this gave you kind of an idea of what it is. And if you are like me, when you read it once, then you picked it up. Yeah, I picked it up again and I read it twice. And for you, I was on my fourth time. So I think it's a book that actually, you will keep. There are many, many books I have that I haven't read yet. You can't see it. It's here on my left. And there are books I kind of give to other people when I read them. That one is staying on my bookshelf up until the end of my life, I think. But many, many thanks for joining us here. I'm so glad to see all your faces. It's so nice to connect in these times and days. And I'm looking forward to Ben's presentation. Sorry.
And lastly, I want to, especially because you're here, Jorge, I want to give people a heads up. For those of you who read fast, and if you've already started on Ben's book and you want to move forward to the one even after that, I haven't posted it yet, but we also have the moderator here today. So Jorge is going to be moderating the May, Ben is April, Jorge is May, yeah. Jorge will be doing the May selection, which is by one of my favorite authors, a Brazilian author. But Jorge, you want to tell the people about that?
Yeah, it's the pilgrimage of Paulo Coelho. It's about the way, and everybody knows what's the way. It's the Trail of Santiago. And but as you said, Trish, and thank you for mentioning it, it will be in May presentation. So I will just put it like that, just on that shelf. Get yourself the book if you want it in advance. But of course, Ben's is before. So we'll get into that on Ben's presentation. Okay. Thank you.
And so a final thank you to all of you for being here today as part of the book club, whether this was your first time or the second or the third. We are always grateful to have you guys participate. We're going to go ahead and keep with having the question form that we had, the Google Doc. What I am going to ask Ben to do though this year, and Nina we had a discussion about this, that perhaps Ben, you could put some questions out to us in that form, and then we can refer to that through the month. And of course, everybody else is welcome and encouraged to share their questions and their comments and insights in that document. That will help Ben then to prepare for the end of the month group discussion. Okay, so we're all working together to help one another. And if you want to say a thank you to Nina in a way that can kind of help her along, we do have a virtual tip jar for her. You're not obligated, but if you would like to thank her in that way, that is at www.paypal.me/Nina Seffusatti. And that is in one of your emails. So if you want to refer to it there, or you can go on our website and look at our tip jar page, that option is available to you. So huge, huge thanks, Nina, for putting all of this together. What a beautiful book to introduce us to, and all of the efforts that you put in to teach us about Provence. Just thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. So, so looking forward to see all of you again. And yes, if any suggestions about how, questions, Kaja, you had the idea of putting maybe the questions or themes up before, the end of the month is a great idea. Yeah. So thank you. I enjoyed it. I'm sending you kisses because that's the French way of doing it.
Merci à tous.
And if you have any other questions, please write to me, right? Bye-bye. Take care.